we are never educated on our pelvic floor. The only thing we hear about this part of our body is like, you have a vagina and it's like for sex, which is not just the case. The way that Western medicine is designed right now is that we have a doctor for a body part. We have a bladder doctor, a colon doctor, a uterus doctor, but your pelvic floor muscles are affiliated with all of those different organs and systems. Often with pelvic floor issues, something's happening like leaks with urine, even like deep back pain or deep hip pain that's just not relieved with stretching, any sexual dysfunction, pooping issues like constipation, fissures, hemorrhoids, any of these things that are kind of going on in the pelvic arena, your pelvic floor muscles are likely responsible. But we don't think about muscles in this arena, but muscles are either weak or they're too tense, right? Just like every other muscle in your body. It's the same thing for your pelvic floor. You can have tension and it needs to be relaxed, or you can have weakness and it needs to be strengthened.
And we are live. Dr. Sara Reardon, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Robert. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm excited to be chatting with you. So every day we have a morning meeting with my employees, and I'm going through my call list for the day. I'm like at 2 o'clock, I've got a podcast with the Vagina Whisperer, and that just kind of like stopped them on their tracks. They all kind of like raised their eyebrows and wanted to know more. So I got to hand it to you. You've got a pretty crafty tagline for your username. I mean, that's definitely a conversation starter for sure.
It is, and I wish I could take credit for it. This was a name that my friends gave me almost 15 years ago when I was first practicing as a pelvic floor physical therapist. And I ended up talking to their moms about their pelvic floor issues. And now, we've all had babies and we're in perimenopause. So I'm like their pocket vagina whisperer, but it is a very catchy name. But I think it's actually kind of, very on brand for me because I'm really comfortable and outspoken talking about the pelvic floor, talking about vulvar and vaginal health, and just, really bringing this into the spotlight because I think it's an underaddressed part of women's health.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, we'll talk about all kinds of things on this recording today, but when it comes to just conversations in general, like I get frustrated, my listenership gets frustrated with just a lot of the ignorance around health, fitness, wellness, nutrition, especially from Western medicine doctors. Like they just don't have much information out there. Like you have to kind of go and dig for it on your own.
Yes.
Why do you think there's just not much information, low-hanging fruit around that topic? Like why is that an uncertainty that people have to go to Google to find out?
I think that we are never educated on our pelvic floors. When we are young, we get potty training. When you are a young woman, you maybe get a little bit of period education, which is like maybe a book and reading the box, of tampons and how to use them. Maybe sex ed, depending on where you live and what school you go to, but we're never educated about our pelvic floor. And the only thing we hear about this part of our body is like, you have a vagina and it's like for sex, which is not just the case, and that we shouldn't talk about it. It's taboo, it's dirty, it's inappropriate, but we don't talk about the healthcare aspect of it. So I think one of it is just kind of societal norms that this is an off-limits topic. And the other part is, as you mentioned, the way that Western medicine is designed right now is that we have a doctor for a body part. We have a bladder doctor, a colon doctor, a uterus doctor, but your pelvic floor muscles are affiliated with all of those different organs and systems, yet we don't have anyone looking at those until they get to a pelvic floor therapist. So it's just a really missed aspect of healthcare. And I think that, I've been working hard. I've been in this field for 18 years, and to really see the awareness of pelvic floor health increase over the past 5 years with social media and, online platforms. It's necessary because it's long overdue that we start paying attention to this part of our bodies.
Totally agree. And out of curiosity, like this is never a topic that is discussed in male circles, but I mean, men have a pelvic floor too. It's just a muscle group around that region. So why is it never discussed amongst guys?
You're absolutely right. Males also have a pelvic floor. All genders have a pelvic floor, and a lot of men have pelvic floor issues. I think one of the reasons is, we go to annual gynecological visits as women starting at the age of 18, and men don't typically have that. They maybe check in with a primary care doctor and then get referred to a urologist or someone else if needed. But we kind of have that additional layer of care for our reproductive organs. And also women go through changes like periods and pregnancy and childbirth and then menopause, where those are risk factors for developing pelvic floor issues. And we maybe get a little bit more attention of those issues arising. But for men, it's just like there's no opportunity for discussion. And, women talk. We talk about everything. And so I think that that's just kind of a missed conversation topic for men too, because again, I don't know if there's a disconnect with comfort level or with muscles or with doctors, but it's, very prevalent that men have pelvic floor issues. They just don't get addressed either.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, the bodybuilding space, it's like you got to be able to know how to flex and make use of every single muscle region you got. So, like, to me, it just kind of made sense. But I guess kind of talking about pelvic floor within guys' circles is against bro code for societal standards. I don't know.
And I'm kind of with you. I mean, I do think it's a little bit of bro code. I'll go with it because you said it, but I think that this part of our body is often hidden. And what we see on the outside is very visible. We don't see this part of our bodies. It's, literally labeled private parts. But I think that it's easy to kind of brush off these issues. They're often embarrassing. I would say men can experience bladder issues like, difficulty emptying their urine stream, a slow stream, a weak stream, dribbling after peeing. They can have rectal pain, tailbone pain, painful bowel movements. But it's actually not until I think men start experiencing sexual symptoms like erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, difficulty maintaining erections. That's when I see them really coming into physical therapy to get their issues addressed. So it's got to kind of start affecting the sexual piece where they're like, okay, now I need to get help.
Gotcha. So men typically just think with their penis, and once that's impacted, then it becomes a priority.
I didn't say that, but I mean, maybe.
It's probably the case. What got you into this field of study in the first place? Like, what made you interested in diving down this path and taking it one step further and helping others?
I've always been an active person. I went to physical therapy school thinking I was going to be a sports PT, but during grad school, I had a professor who gave us a few weeks of lecture on what was called women's health, is now called pelvic health. And I think as a woman, I just was really fascinated learning about my own body. Like, I didn't know that there were muscles that help us pee, or that, tight muscles can cause painful sex, or straining with pooping is bad. There were just so many kind of light bulbs going off that were like, oh, these are muscles, but nobody talks about them. And then when I started working with patients in the pelvic floor therapy space, I felt like this is the therapy that's so important. You're helping people, all genders, with really intimate, embarrassing issues that affect their quality of life, and they had no idea there was help for that. When you get an ACL tear or a shoulder injury, you can go to rehab and go to therapy, and it's hard, but it's kind of normal. This type of therapy, nobody even was aware of, and so they were so grateful when they were able to have enjoyable sex that wasn't painful, or run again after they had stopped because of leaking. Just the rewards were so big for them that I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I love helping other women and people understand their bodies better too. Gotcha.
So if someone's listening, what are some super actionable takeaways? Like, what are some things they need to be on the lookout for of like, okay, this is occurring in me personally, so I may have a problem or an issue here. What steps should I take to correct course? Like, what are some just actionable, low-hanging fruit takeaways that they can just take and run with?
I start the book floored. It's called A Woman's Guide to Pelvic Floor Health at Every Age and Stage, but it's really, I think, for anyone with a pelvic floor, which is everyone, because it goes over the basics of like, what is our normal? Like, how often are you supposed to pee? What's the proper way to poop? What happens to our muscles when we have sex? And so it's just the education we never got to understand this part of our body. And often with pelvic floor issues, if you don't have to think about your pelvic floor, then you're probably fine. But if something's happening like leaks with urine, urine leaks with exercise or coughing or sneezing, or even like deep back pain or deep hip pain that's just not relieved with stretching, any sexual dysfunction, whether it's painful sex, decreased sensation with sex, inability to have orgasms, pooping issues like constipation, fissures, hemorrhoids, any of these things that are kind of going on in the pelvic arena, your muscles play a role. And so even if you had an infection and it's gone, but then you still have symptoms in the area, your pelvic floor muscles are likely responsible. So I always say the low-hanging fruit is like, if you feel like something's going on, and you should check in with a therapist to get your muscles evaluated, because, over 50% of people have pelvic floor issues and they're just going unaddressed because they don't know that there's help for them.
What are the, like, when it comes to, it's going to be probably highly individualized, but when it comes to issues with the pelvic floor, is it oftentimes more so an issue of, underdeveloped muscles there, or not having the proper mind-muscle connection? Or is it something totally different? Because like when I think of that, it's like It's almost like breathing. Like breathing requires muscles, but you don't really have to think about it. It just happens naturally.
You are so right. And actually, your pelvic floor muscles contract and relax with every breath that you take. So they're working all throughout the day to keep in, urine and bowel movements until you have to go, to help with breathing, supporting your pelvic organs like your bladder, your uterus, your bowels, your prostate. So it's working for you. But again, it's not until you have a problem that you're like, something feels off or something's not right. So I think that, again, some of the specific issues I mentioned, like peeing and pooping problems, sexual problems, pelvic organ prolapse in women. But we don't think about muscles in this arena, but muscles are either weak or they're too tense, right? Just like every other muscle in your body. You can have weak core muscles and then you strengthen them and it helps your back pain. Or you can have tight neck muscles that are causing you headaches and migraines and you relieve the tension and change your posture and then it gets better. It's the same thing for your pelvic floor. You can have tension and it needs to be relaxed, or you can have weakness and it needs to be strengthened. But I think the narrative for pelvic floor health has always been strengthen. Like you have pain, strengthen. You have leakage, strengthen, But a lot of people have that tension where they actually need to not do Kegels and not strengthen, and they need to work on relaxation. So it really depends on which pathway you need to walk down. And I go over this in the book of like how to check yourself. What are the symptoms you should have to help guide you down? You need strengthening or you need relaxation.
Gotcha. So when it comes to the strengthening, that's pretty much like everybody kind of gravitates towards Kegels as like the quintessential movement for strengthening, right?
Kegels. And I also like, we've for decades been sucking in our cores, pull your belly button toward your spine, tighten everything up. And a lot of the workouts we do are so tightening focused, but we're not balancing that with relaxation. So even if it's not just Kegels, like everything we're doing is to like build muscle, but we're not building relaxation, flexibility, coordination. So it's a little bit of balance that I think we need to these muscles. So yeah, obviously it's not just Kegels, and it is kind of making sure that your muscles are at rest, a nice relaxed state, and then you can contract them, but also relax them. And I think even if you think about workouts that a lot of your community does, or even yourself, it's that everything is tight. Like we're lifting weights, we're shortening muscles, we're pulling in our belly buttons, but we're never focused on that letting go aspect, which I think is a missed component.
Is there like, just from like a structural positioning, sentiment, is there like certain positions that we find ourselves in all day long that are just horrendous for pelvic floor health and relaxation, and some that are better than others? Like when I think of myself just sitting in an office chair for a large percentage of the day working on a computer, like my shoulders and traps get really tight. So like that's obviously not conducive to relaxing that. Is there like an equivalent for pelvic floor muscles?
Yeah, I always say sitting is the new smoking. Just like what it does to your neck and shoulders, it does the same thing to your pelvic floor. Your pelvic floor needs movement, it needs mobility, it needs changes. People always say, like, what's the best posture for my pelvic floor? I'm like, the next one that you're in. Because you don't want to stand all day, but you also don't want to sit all day. So I think, moving positions, getting up and moving every 30 minutes is really important. If you are a person who finds yourself clenching your butt a lot, literally like a tight ass, we'll find people when they're stressed or they're in Zoom meetings or they're sitting in traffic, they're tightening their tush, and that tightens their pelvic floor. Another one is crossing your legs. A lot of individuals kind of wrap their legs up like pretzels or roll their thighs inward and their feet are out, and that turns on your pelvic floor. Which again, these aren't terrible, but they can over time lead to more tension and more overactivity in the muscles. So, and I always say, like, you could do stretches and breathing till the cows come home, but if you're sitting at a desk with your butt clenched all day, your pelvic floor is going to stay overly tight and tense, and you need to change that posture.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Are you familiar with the So-Right psoas stretcher? Like, is that conducive to relaxing the pelvic floor muscle?
Yeah, is that the device where it kind of like goes, you can adjust it, but it goes like on the inside of your hip bones and kind of digs deep into your psoas?
Yeah, it's like a U, and you just basically put weight on that U going into either side of the pelvis. It's kind of painful, but it feels oddly satisfying.
Great. Yeah, I am familiar with it. I actually used it after playing tennis with a friend one day, and I think it's great. It's one of those things that I think it's hard to get to that muscle, so releasing that muscle can be really nice. 36 muscles attached to your pelvis, and your psoas muscles are part of that, your hip flexors. So I think it's really important to look at all of those outside muscles, your psoas muscles, your rectus abdominal muscles, your adductors, your glutes, your low back muscles. Again, what we're looking for is balance. So if you have really short hip flexors, like your psoas, you probably have really short hamstrings. So you get kind of these wonky imbalances in the pelvis that also lead to pelvic floor tension and imbalances. So I love working on the psoas like that. I really think about it like peeling layers of an onion. Like you've got to work the outside first, the psoas, the glutes, the adductors, release tension, balance those muscles, and that will actually kind of help release some of the internal muscles as well.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting. My wife, she's like due any day now with her second son. So we're going to the midwife every single week. We're doing everything as naturally as possible. We do all these like exercises daily, all these stretches, like all this stuff. Like she's deep in the weeds.
I love it. it.
Yeah. So we're on that page, that chapter. But in not wanting to, use anything like an epidural, and nothing against people that take the epidural route, but like from a natural birth standpoint, if you're taking an epidural, you're obviously losing a lot of the mind-muscle connection towards everything going on down there to be able to effectively and safely push out a baby and listen and feel for what the baby is trying to tell you as it's moving through the birth canal. But I feel like in listening to all these conversations with the doulas and the midwives and all that Crystal, my wife, is telling me, all the podcasts that we've listened to, it's like the more you can have that mind-muscle connection, especially with something like your pelvic floor muscle, the increased likelihood of you having a healthy, safe birth, which is obviously the priority at that chapter in life. So yeah, I feel like this is just stuff that people take for granted until it's like do or die time, but should be top of the pinnacle of the priority list.
You are so right. And that was actually one of the reasons I started my Instagram account, The Vagina Whisperer. I was pregnant with my second son. I had already had an unmedicated birth. I had done pelvic floor therapy during my pregnancy, and had actually an incredible birth. I had no tearing. I didn't use pain management. And it wasn't that I was like, oh, I'm this strong hero. I was like, no, I was in pain and I was begging for those drugs, but it was too late. But what I realized was that with proper preparation and support, that you have a chance at a better outcome. Versus I feel like if you just kind of follow the protocol that's given to you, there's, it's always looking out for the safety of baby and mom. But what I see after those experiences is women and moms who often feel like they weren't in control, traumatized from birth, having gone through really difficult and long labors, and then sometimes ending up with a cesarean section or pelvic floor damage and trauma, that they were like, could I have done something different? And so we were always kind of looking backwards instead of saying like, what can we do differently moving forwards? Let's think about the people who are having births that are less traumatic, have less pelvic floor damage. Like, what are they doing that's leading to better outcomes? And that's really where I started the Vagina Whisperer. And I'm much, I'm very open. Whatever type of birth you have, like, I will support you 100% before and after. My goal is to really empower women and whatever options that they want to choose. But I don't think that during birth we often feel like we have options, unless you're like your wife who's doing a lot of preparation, or myself who kind of knew a lot and was like, okay, how am I best going to implement the people and the procedures that can give me the best outcomes? So I think that I'm kind of in the camp of less is more when it comes to birth, and not a lot of physicians agree with me on that, but it does lead to some better pelvic floor outcomes. But we're just not in a society, a medical system that is looking at everything. Sometimes the aftermath, it's really just kind of very medical interventions to optimize safety, which is important. But I do think that we kind of need to move a little bit more towards the middle versus like over medicalizing birth.
Yeah, it's we could have a whole conversation on this topic.
I know. And it's a touchy topic too. It's a touchy one. So, but I agree with y'all. I just think more than anything, I want women to feel informed and that they have the ability to make choices. And then birth is going to go where it's going to go, versus feeling like everything's being done to them and they're just a passenger in the process.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like, and this is kind of what I was alluding to in the very beginning of like, there's just not much information out there and people are ignorant, because unless they're naturally minded, I feel very blessed because I went down the nutrition rabbit hole early on. And when you start going down one rabbit hole, it just leads to the next. But when it comes to like birth, like, unless you know somebody that has had a home birth or done things naturally, or you heard it on a podcast, you started diving down that trajectory, like, it's just not even discussed, not even talked about. When you just find out that you're pregnant, you go to your, primary care and you just go through the motions, because that's not on their lips at all.
Right.
But there's so much that women can do proactively leading up to the birth to set themselves up for success, minimize risk of tearing, have a faster, more efficient recovery postpartum. And yeah, again, it's just totally not even part of the conversation, which is very unfortunate. Same thing with birth control too. Like, birth control there's just so many things that are not spoken of, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I think with birth itself, it's there's so much you can do during pregnancy, and I think, again, it's one of those narratives. It's like, oh, if you're peeing your pants during pregnancy, that's normal. Just deal with it after. Oh, back pain during pregnancy is normal. Deal with it after. Oh, you don't need to prepare for birth. Like, we'll tell you what to do. But there's so much that you can do during pregnancy. One of the most, common things we see at my clinic here in New Orleans is we do birth preparation. Like, we teach people, how do you do perineal massage? How do you push properly? You need to relax your pelvic floor during that last trimester. You don't need all this tension in there, because for birth, you really need your muscles to get out of the way. Your uterus is pushing the baby out. Your pelvic floor muscles need to move to the side. But if you don't know how to relax your hips and your pelvis and your pelvic floor and push, then when you're in birth, and you've got doctors and lights and, medicine, it's just, you've never been trained. It's like we're asking women to run a marathon, but we didn't teach them how to run a mile. And I think that they deserve this education. I always felt like, well, why did I just pick this path and I'm lucky and can take care of my vagina? I'm like, everybody should be able to have access to this. And that's where the book comes in, is that I really think that women and their medical providers can benefit from at least knowing from a pelvic floor perspective what's optimal. And then again, birth and all these things, it takes the course it takes, but at least what's supported in the evidence and the clinical practices that can at least give them better chances of pelvic floor outcomes.
Totally. Are you targeting more so the consumers of the book, like people that have the pelvic floor, just the everyday people? Or are you trying to target the providers that need this information so that they can implement it for their patients?
No, the book is very much written for the just everyday person. I mean, it's there's a chapter called The Scoop on Poop. It's not super medical, but it's very much backed in evidence. I mean, there's a ton. I really dove into the research because I want to be able to say everything that's in there is backed by evidence and science, which is important to me. I think that there's a fire hose of information coming at people right now, and it's important that it comes from, to me, a credentialed individual. And it's not just based on, one person's experience, but really clinical experience and science. But I also think that medical providers get such little education on pelvic floor health and assessments that they're going to benefit from reading this book. I mean, they have pelvic floors. We see OBGYNs in my clinic who are practitioners, but also pregnant and giving birth. And so everyone benefits from this education that I offer in the book.
100%. So for women, what are the monumental chapters in their life or phases, so to speak, where this information becomes paramount? You kind of alluded to them earlier, pregnancy, apart from just the day-to-day obvious implications, but just the monumental phases, so to speak.
It's interesting because I actually started this book, the first chapter's on periods. And I could have written a book, again, just on pregnancy and birth and just on perimenopause and menopause. But, when we start first experiencing pelvic floor changes, it's during our first menstrual cycle, when every month our hormones are changing, and that actually influences your pelvic floor. So you're going to have over 400 and something periods. And every month, your body's changing. So, when you start menstruating and you're learning how to use tampons or, menstrual hygiene products. And then when you become sexually active, if you don't know that sex shouldn't be painful. Some people don't even know that, the urethra and the vagina are two different openings, So I think that's the real basics people need to kind of understand for their bodies, that orgasms are actually pelvic floor contractions. So when you become sexually active, our body changes and you need to know what to look out for. Again, we talked about pregnancy and birth and postpartum. I have chapters on each of those because so much can be done, and also so much information needs to be given during those periods I think we're just not given. And then again, I go into perimenopause and menopause when we go through another huge hormonal shift, which affects our pelvic floor. It can often lead to weakness, dryness, painful sex, things like that. So at every stage of a woman's life, our bodies are changing, and every stage your pelvic floor requires something different. Unfortunately, I think it's not until we start having problems that we're like, wait, what's going on? And we could have prevented or even just been aware of these issues earlier and, have some information about how to treat them.
Totally. This I'm assuming it's probably within your wheelhouse because you're talking to people that are perimenopausal, menopausal. But in my sphere, I've just gotten a ton of questions around, hormonal replacement therapy for women in that chapter. When you're talking with women and they're going through these changes, like, do you have an opinion on that one way or the other? Because you're tackling like the musculature side of it from a pelvic floor standpoint, but you're fielding all these questions around HRT as well, I'm assuming.
You're right. And I think it's, it's a really, big topic right now. The thing around HRT is there is so much more evidence coming out that they are safe for people and, they're not, off limits for anyone who has had a history of breast cancer or who even has or is high risk. But I will say, I think we have to meet people where they are. So I am a proponent of them if it's appropriate for people, using estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, a combination of these things if needed. But if someone's not comfortable with it, I don't think that we should try to convince them that they're fine. If they want to use an alternative route or a non-hormonal option, or I'll just deal with the side effects of perimenopause and menopause without hormones, I think that there's that right. And we have to kind of give them some other options to navigate some of the symptoms, like using a vaginal moisturizer or doing pelvic floor strengthening if they don't want to use hormones. So I think, hormone therapy is a little bit more nuanced than nobody should be on it and everybody should be on it. I still think we need kind of very individualized care in this arena. One thing I am a huge fan of is topical estrogen on the vulva and vagina because it's very local. It can help plump up and thicken those vulvar and vaginal tissues, strengthen the pelvic floor, help with lubrication, and it's not systemic. It doesn't kind of go systemically. It kind of is very local to those tissues. So I am a huge fan of that if someone's comfortable with it. But when I think it comes to kind of more, systemic hormones, I really think it's individualized, and I think it's great if someone wants to do it. I actually think people are under-prescribed it often. They're still like, oh, menopause, do as little as possible, as long as possible. And I'm not in that camp. But I think that if someone's not comfortable with it, we need to be able to give them other options too.
Yeah, it's always this like balancing act, it seems, because just as we were talking about earlier, less is often more. We want to kind of return to this naturalistic approach towards, giving birth and having as little intervention as possible, as little Western medicine implications as possible. But then like with some things as science is coming out and we're learning more, it's like, okay, maybe it makes sense to ramp that up in this regard.
Yeah.
So it's always a balancing act, the dance that we're playing.
You're so right. And I think it's a dance, and I think it's a little bit of options. I think it's, again, one of those things where it's up to us as medical providers to say, hey, these are the options. These are the benefits. These are the side effects. What do you feel like is best for you? This is what I would recommend, but I also have to listen to where you are, In full transparency, I'm 42, I'm in perimenopause, and I've been having horrendous perimenopausal symptoms, like heavy periods and mom rage and, anxiety, like all of these things. And I was like, I'm not taking any hormones. I'm going super natural. I did all the things, took my supplements, and then I was like, okay, this is not cutting it. And after 2 months of trying progesterone, which I put off for 6 months, I was like, I feel like myself again. And so it was one of those things where I made the decision. I was given the options, kind of made the decision. I was like, okay, I had to do my own research as to like, what are the side effects? How often should I take them? I still had to kind of do my due diligence, but I do feel grateful that I am in the space where I feel like I can inform myself, I can advocate for what I need, but also be open to exploring different things if I'm not getting the results that I'm looking for.
Yeah, 100%. You got to be objective and you got to be honest with yourself. Like if you know what your results should be, what you want, what you're looking for, and you're not getting them, then be objective about that reality and troubleshoot. That's really what it boils down to.
Yeah. Or you say, I'm just going to deal with this and this is just how it is. But I don't think it's fair for someone to tell me like, oh, you're just going to have to deal with this. I'm like, no, what are my options? And let's make a decision together as a team.
100%. And your book just released this past Tuesday, is that right?
It did. It released on June 10th. So I was in New York, and I was, it was really exciting to be able to talk on national news about the pelvic floor. They said they had never had a pelvic floor therapist on their show, which is pretty incredible. And it's been an amazing week where so many people are coming out and saying, like, I'm so glad you wrote this. I already started reading it. I'm, teaching my daughter about using tampons, and I'm teaching my mom about prolapse and menopause, and just, really seeing how we can share this information with the women in our lives, with our medical providers, to just help us better understand our bodies and, be on the lookout and kind of proactively care for it. It's like, I always say it's like dental care. It's like, we see a dentist once or twice a year. We get tune-ups, we get everything looked at because we can see our teeth, but nobody sees this part of our body. So it's really amazing to be able to educate women and have them feel empowered about their own bodies instead of in the dark.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% on board with that message. I mean, I feel like people just are completely ignorant around what their body should feel like in the first place. Like in the nutrition realm, like people don't even know what feeling good feels like because they don't ever feel good to begin with.
Yeah.
They don't know how to move their body. They don't understand proper biomechanics. But once you learn that, once you become acclimated to it, it's like this whole new world opens up to you. And I would assume the same thing is true with women, especially in the pelvic floor space. It's like once you understand these things, once you're equipped with that knowledge, it's like you can change things for the better and, charge forward with the day and not worry about it.
I hope so. I can't tell you how many people message me and they say, every time I pee, I think of you, Sara. And I'm like, okay, well then I must be giving you good advice, because they were like, I've been peeing all wrong. And I'm like, well, all right then. I'm glad you read chapter 4, So it's one of those things where, like, we don't know what we don't know. And I just firmly believe that no one is teaching us about our bodies. And often, even when we do have the courage to speak up about something we're experiencing, we're still gaslit and dismissed. And yet these symptoms affect so many aspects of our lives, from our ability to exercise, work, have intimate relationships, birth babies, get pregnant. I mean, just so many things. And I'm like, I want to live an active, fulfilling life, and I deserve that. But I'm grateful I have this information, but I want everyone to have access to that.
Well, we got to have someone brave enough like yourself to put it out there. You're not getting any pushback from others, are you? Like they're not, negative towards the content you're putting out.
I wouldn't say negative. I think that sometimes from broader media sites, they don't feel comfortable using the word vagina. Like I've definitely been turned down from news segments where like, we think this is really important, but we don't really want to say your Instagram handle, or we don't want to say vagina. And I'm like, okay, we're not there yet, but we're talking about pelvic floors publicly. Like this is progress. Like any way that we can move the needle, I think is positive. But I do think that it's still an uncomfortable topic for people, which that's fine. I'll meet them where they are. But the more conversations we can have, I think the more, we're able to help a lot of people, all genders, men and women who need this type of therapy and they just don't even know it exists.
Yeah. When you were in New York for your interview, what news channel was that for? It
was for NBC. So it was NBC National News, and I was on 2 segments in their daily news, and it was awesome. I mean, the women were amazing. One of them was a postpartum mom, and 2 of them, one of them was an older woman who had several kids. Another one had fibroids. So, they felt like, hey, we want this information. I feel like I need to know this, and I want other people to know it. But again, I think until you've kind of been in those situations, you don't see the need or the value. My goal is that we're proactively educating people about this, not always kind of feeling like we're having to do it afterwards. But it's huge progress. I mean, I think everybody's been really receptive, and I try to bring a little bit of levity to it. It's, I think.
Do you wear your vagina costume on set?
I've gotten several vagina costumes now. And the only reason I did is because I don't like to travel with it, because I'm like, if this thing gets messed up, like that's my whole brand, and the company doesn't make them anymore. But, I think it's really fun to be able to do this and to bring levity to it and make people hopefully feel comfortable about something that can be really uncomfortable for some.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like just like open communication and dialogue is of paramount importance with whatever the topic is. I mean, that's why relationships make it or break it, just being able to communicate with one another. And I feel like this is the same thing. It's like there's obviously a need for this information. There's issues that could be addressed, but they'll never be brought to the light of day if we don't feel comfortable talking about it. And we all have a pelvic floor. I mean, this is all equipment that we're all familiar with to some extent. Like, why is it this taboo thing in the first place? That makes no sense to me. It's not realistic.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like societal norms and the narratives, and I think about if we know better, then we can teach the next generation better. I think that our parents just didn't have this. They were kind of had subscribed to the narrative of like, this is just what happens when you have babies. This is just what happens when you get older. You go and you buy your diapers and your liners and you just deal with pain and discomfort. But I think our generation, we are so information hungry and health forward and curious that we're like, wait, why are we dealing with this one? Is there another way? And so my hope is that we can, really change this for the next generation. I mean, I have 2 sons, and I think that they probably know more about a woman's body than most women know about their own bodies. Like, they know what tampons are, and they know what periods are, and, they know, like, I've got vulva and pelvic floor models just hanging around my house because of my job, but it's kind of normal to them. And I think that I hope that they feel just comfortable and, informed about their bodies and the other gender's bodies as well. So it's not so weird or gross or anything like, oh, that's a period, that's gross. I'm like, no, it's just a period. Like, that's it. And so I'm really hoping that we're able to change that for the next generation as well.
I think that's definitely, from a parenting standpoint, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I'm probably biased because I know my upbringing, but my dad's a biologist. So like, science and biology is just the norm. That was just what we discussed around the dinner table, So like, things that I take for granted and people find disgusting or strange to talk about, like, it's just black and white, science to me. Right. And I feel like when you have that approach, like, it removes the stigma because it's just reality. And when there's no stigma, it makes for easy conversation.
Right. And, I think it's some of us, like, to your point, like, and I'll be honest, like, some of these conversations are still hard for me, and that's my own undoing. Like, they're like, when they're like, what is sex? And I'm like thinking about it, and then I teach it to them. I'm like, oh, this is from a totally just like heteronormative perspective. Like, we don't talk about any like homosexuality, or because it's like, that's not in our home, but it's very much out in the world, So it's, some of it is like, I'm still learning my own biases and my own upbringing, my own kind of tunnel vision, where I'm like, oh, okay, this is like, I'm still figuring this out too. I'm just like every other parent, kind of fumbling with like, oh, how do I answer this question? But I think it's the intention is to do better, to give them more than what we had. And not that our parents did a bad job by any means. They just didn't know any different.
Yeah, totally. How old are your 2 sons?
They're 8 and 10. 8
and 10. Nice. What does 8 and 10 look like? Because I'm going to have, my oldest son just turned 3 and the other one's due any day now.
So 2 boys?
Yeah, 2 boys. And I was one of 2 boys. My brother, I've got a younger brother. So I know the boy dynamic from self-experience. But like, yeah, Crystal, my wife, I mean, she comes from a lot of girls. So I don't know. I don't know what 8 and 10 is going to be like. Is that easier than 3 and infant? Or
it's easier and in some ways more difficult than the others. I would say I'm one of 4. So I have 2 sisters and a brother. So I came from a very girl-centric world as well. And so having 2 boys is a totally different space than I'm used to, like the fighting and the wrestling and the like balls off the wall. Like, they're both super sporty kids, and we do soccer and baseball, and we're a pretty active household. And honestly, like, I love that because I'm really active, and I feel like it keeps me like healthy. And I focus on like, I want to be able to run down the soccer field with them. I want to be able to like go up and down and do puzzles and, play soccer and baseball. So I love that active part, but it's a lot of activity. It's not quiet. But they share a room. They don't need to, like, we have enough bedrooms, but we make them share a room because I think it's important that they kind of have some connection. They play together amazingly. They also fight a lot, but it's fun. I mean, they're fun and funny, and they're great kids. And, I don't know any different, but I have a very blessed life, and I'm really happy with, you get what you get, boys and girls, you get what you get. But I love it. I love being a boy mom. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. Did y'all go like the homeschool route, or y'all put them in school, or what'd y'all do there?
They're in school. So we have, I've always worked full time. My husband works full time. So we're definitely a 2-parent working household. And was one of those moms that when my son was 3 months old and it was time for me to go back to work, I was like, oh, I'm ready. Like, I am not meant to be home with my kids. I'm a better mom when I'm away working. But, and now I have a job and I have a ton of flexibility. So I bring them to school. I pick them up. We do practices. So I feel like I get the best of both worlds. They are in school, and we both work, but I have a lot of flexibility where I can be with them and spend time with them, which, my mom just didn't have that ability back in the day. We were the last kids in aftercare till 6 o'clock. And so I do feel really lucky that we've been able to carve that out for ourselves.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think as long as you got to spend time with them in whatever way you chop it up, whether it's throughout the day or after the school hours, or having that flexibility, as long as you spend time with them and it's quality time, you're present with them, like that's the best thing any parent could do.
Yeah, I mean, I could work on the being present part because I'm always there, like, you're on your phone. I'm like, I know, buddy, I'm sorry, So I think we can all work on that a little bit. But I will tell you, I feel completely confident I get plenty of time with them. So I'm with them a lot, but it's good. I mean, they grow fast and it's fun and I want to be around them. And they're at an age where, like, this past Mother's Day, I would say in the past, I've been like, oh, I just want a break. I just want to, get away from my kids. And this was like, no, I want to spend the whole day with my kids. I want to swim. I want to play tennis. I want to go on walks. Like, it's just, they're at that age where I want to be around them. So it's a good spot.
Yeah, no, that's super exciting. It's awesome. But what else has got you excited going forward? I mean, I know the book just getting published is a huge, huge deal. So congrats there. But like, what else has got you revved up from an entrepreneurial, personal, family, just whatever standpoint? What's got you excited?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So, I don't know why I decided to do this the same time I was launching a book, but I'm building an app. So I currently have pelvic floor workout programs that are just kind of desktop version. But in January of this year, we decided to transition all of them to an app. So it'll be kind of much more user friendly, scalable, accessible. My hope is that really pelvic floor education and exercise becomes almost what we'd call mainstream. So when you're pregnant, you're like, oh, start these workouts. Here's your weekly pelvic floor tips. You're preparing for birth. This is how you push. This is, how you stretch. You're recovering from birth. Here's how to do C-section massage. Here's, how to take your first poop after giving birth. Like, you're into menopause. Here's your perimenopause pelvic floor workout. So really kind of, we have workouts for everything. And even in, postpartum and perimenopause, we're like strength train, but we're not thinking about our pelvic floor, how to integrate pelvic floor health into our day and into our workout. So I'm building an app that should be out this fall. And then, other than that, I'm just really looking for things to kind of slow down a bit. It's been 2 years of writing and promoting the book and traveling for the book. So I'm really taking 3 months after the book finishes launching this month to just like hang out with my family. We've got a couple trips planned and, just kind of be around as a mom where I haven't been able to do that as much as I had historically, and just give myself a much needed break.
That's awesome. Yeah, you've earned it for sure. Is this your first book?
Yeah, first book. It might be my last. Who knows? But I would say it's kind of like when you have a kid and you're like, oh my gosh, who would do this again? And then a year later, you're like, oh, I could do that again. So yes, first book, still reeling from it. And it's, it's pretty awesome. The way it came to fruition was it was a follower on social media who was an editor at HarperCollins. And she reached out to me and said, have you ever thought about writing a book? I think that, women need this information. And so it started from there. And, here we are 2 years later with It's on the Shelf. So it's been an incredible journey.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I mean, I felt lucky. I wrote my book. It was during the pandemic. So like I was forced to just be locked in. That was like a perfect time to write. But man, like for me, I couldn't get anything done until I just committed to, okay, no matter what, come hell or high water, I'm putting 500 words on a page every single day. Like I had to have that, that pinnacle where I was like, I have to get this accomplished, because if you write a book, I mean, it's easy to just like put it on the back burner, Yes. It's like with anything in life. And with a book, it's just, you got to chip away in some form or fashion every single day. At least I did.
No, you're exactly right. And mine was kind of week by week. It was like, okay, this week I have to write half a chapter. The next week you have to write. It was very much, deadline based. And it was, I mean, I pushed the envelope and I was like, oh, I've got 12 months. Oh, I've got 9 months. Oh shit, I've got 6 months, And so it was like, okay, rent an office. I gave up drinking. I gave up traveling. I rented an office and I spent every, 2 or 3 days a week and, one day on the weekend just there. And so I did miss some time with my kids during the weekends. And I actually sold my business. I mean, I had a clinic, a brick and mortar physical therapy clinic, and I sold it before I signed the contract to write the book. Because I said, I know I can't do all of these. I can't have a digital platform, an in-person clinic, be a mom and a wife, take care of myself and write a book. And I was like, something's got to give. So I sold my clinic and I work for them now, but I don't run that business. But it was a huge decision, but I definitely feel like it helped me carve out the time to create this.
Yeah. Plus it's given you, I would assume, a lot more, I don't know, flexibility. You're not stuck on working on the business as much. You're able to just like do the things that you want to do and kind of really double down on your strengths more so than just like the administrative component of it.
I mean, I love patient care, so I'm really fortunate that I'm still able to do that. But I think, when I think about impact, it was like, I love my, working at the clinic in New Orleans, but how are we going to make change? How do I want to impact people? And, being able to reach people digitally, virtually is really much more impactful right now. And so I think that that's where I, said I want to go forward with this app and hopefully get hospitals and doctors and practices and midwives and to really start implementing this, because I think it's kind of a missing piece in our healthcare model. So that's really my goal right now, again, is to just kind of get this out there and have it be more mainstream.
100%. You have a podcast?
I don't.
You should totally start a podcast. I know you got a million things going right now already, so I'm just adding more to it. But like from a business standpoint, from a branding standpoint, like I feel like podcasting is the best medium to get the message out there at scale. And like it just opens the doors for so many connections, and like nobody says no to a podcast. I don't know. I feel like podcasting is definitely the most bang for the proverbial buck from like a marketing and growth and informational content standpoint.
That's so interesting because I feel like so many people have podcasts right now. I'm like, is the podcast world saturated? So I have no idea.
It's funny. I mean, a lot of people think that, and it makes sense why you would think that. But like when you look at the stats, like the vast majority of all the podcasts on iTunes have less than 2 episodes. Like more than 50% of all the podcasts have less than 2 episodes. There's no staying power. Like
interesting.
People start a podcast and they just drop off. And like me, I started mine in 2016 and I've got like almost 800 episodes now. But, that's kind of an oddity. Like you just got to be consistent with it, like anything else. But if you did the book, you've obviously got the ability to be consistent. And I feel like this information would be well received in audio format. I mean, I feel like the title of a podcast that was the Vagina Whisperer would certainly get some downloads too. So I feel like it would work well for you.
I think we just put vagina on everything. Well, like certainly it'll get hits,
Yeah.
So, I've thought about it, and the interesting thing about my career path is it's been not reactive, but it's really kind of in response to what people are asking for. Like the book, it was not like, oh, I want to be an author. It was like somebody came up to me. I was like, let me think about this. And you kind of start feeling pulled in certain directions. So maybe that will be the next direction. I feel excited about the app. I mean, it's beautiful. We've been working on it for 6 months now, and I'm just super thrilled for the way that it'll be just really formatted for people and just a better user experience. We've had over 10,000, users, members over the past, 3 years since we started it. So I think that that's kind of where I want to lean into. And then we'll see. Maybe it's podcasting. Maybe it's another book. Now, I'll still be on social media dancing in a vulva costume. That's not going anywhere. So we'll see what's next, though.
Nice. And where do people go to get the app? The app's not available yet, right?
No. So right now it's just a desktop version, which is very accessible, but I think the app will make it much more mobile friendly. So my website is thevaginawhisperer.com. I've got a ton of blog posts on there that are free, a bunch of free guides. But that's where you can check out the workouts. And I think people are always like, what is a pelvic floor workout? And it's really helping you kind of connect with this part of your body and then bringing that into exercises, whether it's squats and bridges and lunges and, weighted workouts. So it's teaching you how to use this muscle. And then also we have a whole relaxation program if you have painful sex or pelvic floor tension. And now I'm bringing other fitness instructors. Like I've got a woman who does like HIIT workouts and bar workouts. I've got a yoga instructor coming on. So kind of really adding almost like the Peloton for your pelvic floor, like just really building out the content, but it's all very pelvic floor and core friendly and safe.
Nice. Super awesome. And for the book, That's called Floored, and people should go to the website for that, or is it going to be like on Barnes & Noble?
Yeah,
and
you can
all the
find
good
it
spots?
anywhere you buy books. It's called Floored, A Woman's Guide to Pelvic Floor Health at Every Age and Stage. It's hot pink with a grapefruit on the front, so you won't miss it. And it's available on my website, again, thevaginawhisperer.com, or you can get it anywhere you buy books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Bookshop, if you want to support an indie bookstore. So it's we've gotten some great reviews so far, and I'm really excited about it. I really think it's something that, not everybody's ready to take that leap to go to see a therapist in person, or some people can't even access one because of, financial or, geographical reasons. So it's just really a great place, I think, for people to start getting informed and to be able to start doing things at home that can help with their pelvic floor symptoms.
Awesome. Well, I'm in full support of it. I feel like the more information, the better. Just kind of removing some of these negative stigmas, taboo topics, and just like reaching better health and striving for it on a day-to-day basis is key. And having people leading the charge like yourself, addressing these topics that need to be discussed is awesome. So hats off to you for sure.
Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. My pleasure. Dr. Sara Reardon, really appreciate it. I will put out your link on the show notes, make it easy for people to find you.
Thank you.
Take care.